Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and the Steam Machine is launching as we speak. While the price is no surprise, it's left many of us gamers insanely disappointed. But if you already own a gaming handheld, have no fear. I'm about to show you how you can transform your existing gaming handheld into a less expensive, more powerful Steam Machine using a simple eGPU setup. It looks like Ratchet and Clank are gonna just come right out of the screen. Grab you something to snack on and something to sip on, because we have a lot to unpack here. So I'm going to go into settings here and just show what we've got. So if we scroll down here, you'll see we're on SteamOS 3.9. We're on SteamOS Hollow, running the latest version of the Valve kernel. And this is where things get interesting here. Look at our video card. This is my eGPU, the RX 9060 XT. We can check this out here under our display settings. I'm hooked up to an OLED gaming monitor, and so I've got my resolution set to 4K at 120 frames a second. It is a HDR enabled display, and so we get HDR here. Everything's just working. If we look at our quick access menu here, we see I can enable variable refresh rate and HDR here as well. The screen is off on my Legion Go 2. This is the Thunderbolt connector going in from my eGPU dock, which is set up just like this here. All right, here we've got Ratchet and Clank, a rift apart. We're running the game at 4K resolution, and we have frame gen disabled. We're using the IGTI upscaling method with the quality preset and no dynamic resolution scaling. Here we've got Ratchet and Clank, a rift apart, all set up, and this game looks beautiful. And in general, we're hovering around 100 FPS. Sometimes we're dipping slightly below that, around high 80s to low 90s. But overall, it's very smooth and performing quite well. For anybody out there who's interested in getting this set up yourself and would like to see a step-by-step guide, drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. Let me know, and I'll be happy to put together a step-by-step guide that walks you through the entire setup. The thing that's tricky about setting up an eGPU under SteamOS and Linux in general is that the iGPU is the one that the system will default to. And at the time I put this video together, I used the open source project called Always eGPU. And in general, the setup for Always eGPU isn't too bad. It does require a little bit of precision if things don't work right out of the box. But another thing I've learned recently is that the settings get messed up anytime there's a SteamOS update. I eventually discovered another open source project called egpu-switcher-steamos, and this one's a zero configuration eGPU manager. I haven't had a chance to test it out yet, but the really nice thing about it, it's a one command line operation to get everything up and running. And so I'd like to try that one out as well. And I'll be leaving links to both of these open source projects in the description of this video. That way anybody who wants to try it right away doesn't have to wait. The eGPU setup that I'm sharing with you today works on any of your gaming handhelds so long as the Thunderbolt port supports display capabilities. This includes the original Legion Go, Legion Go 2, MSI Claw devices, and ROG Ally X devices and newer. Broadly speaking, there's two types of eGPU adapters. Those that come in a fully enclosed enclosure like this one, and then those that are open like this one. There's pros and cons to both styles. With this one, the big pro is that it comes fully enclosed. And so if you've got kids, animals, other things running around in your house, it adds a little bit more safety and stability. But it's a little bit more involved when you have to take it apart and service it or install a new GPU. And another thing you have to pay attention to is the size constraint. Some GPUs are too big to fit in an enclosure like this. Another pro to this enclosure is that it has a replaceable power supply. This type of setup, on the other hand, the big pro is that it's so easy. You just slot your GPU right in, you plug in a power cable, and then you plug in a cable to your device and you're ready to go. The disadvantage is that it's kind of open to the elements. You're going to really want to place it in a steady environment that doesn't have too much traffic, like your desk or your office. Now let's take a look at some more detailed analysis of how Ratchet and Clank ran during my gameplay testing. Here we have a graph of our average FPS and 1% lows during the gameplay. Our dark blue bar corresponds to our average FPS, and our light blue bar corresponds to our 1% lows. And I'm using the balanced TDP settings during the entire gameplay session. Now let's take a look at the maximum CPU and GPU temperatures while playing the game. The blue bar is our CPU temperature, and the green bar is our external graphics card's temperature. And both devices are running cooler than a polar bear's toenails. Oh yeah! And I couldn't let this clip end without us taking a look at how awesome the cinematics look here. Look at the angry Dr. Nefarious. He's throwing a tantrum there, and then it looks like Ratchet and Clank are going to just come right out of the screen. And this is a camera looking at a screen. This looks amazing. One thing that affects your experience, depending on your operating system, is your eGPU to USB controller. Under Windows, it's less of a problem because most controllers have a driver that's supported, but you have to be a little bit more careful under Linux to find a controller that's compatible with the system. If you have any questions about whether your eGPU works in your setup, drop a comment, ask a question, and I'd encourage you to go a step further. Hit that subscribe button. That way you can join our Discord, which is free for our subscribers. There we have many technical discussions and everyone in the community pitches in to help each other out. This eGPU setup is the one I used in all of my tests and gameplay for today's video. This is the RX 9060 XT with 16 gigs of RAM. And this is the AU-Star eGPU dock. And one thing that's really nice about this dock is it's got both Thunderbolt and Oculink. I don't have any devices with Oculink to test it, but there's some out there. The advantage of Oculink is that it gives you a connection directly to the PCI bus, so you have better bandwidth that way. Let's take a look at the settings I used for Pragmata. I've got it set to 4K resolution, global illumination's high. I'm using FSR1 with the quality target as my upscaler. We do have FrameGen enabled, and pretty much everywhere else it's either high or max settings. Here's a look at some gameplay of Pragmata on my Legion Go 2, and I'm using the balanced TDP settings. Unfortunately, the frame counter and the other metrics that are in the top left corner are not very visible. They're kind of fuzzy. I'm going to have to invest in the future in either a capture card or a better quality camera, but I didn't want to record this in-game and affect the performance, so I used the external camera. But in general, I'm staying at around 100 FPS and occasionally jumping all the way up to 120 FPS. And have no fear, I've actually collected the data from this run, and we're going to take a look at some charts and graphs and just see what our average FPS, our 1% lows, and our temperatures while running this gameplay. And here's a graph of our average FPS and 1% lows during this entire gameplay session. The dark blue bar is our average FPS, the light blue bar is our 1% lows, and I'm using the balanced TDP settings the entire time. And we're seeing that we're averaging a little over 100 FPS, and our 1% lows are 69 FPS. This is very impressive. And in terms of temperatures, my Legion Go 2 and my GPU are barely even breaking a sweat. The dark blue bar is our max CPU temperature, and the green bar is our max GPU temperature. Again, this is the temperature of the eGPU, not the internal GPU. Admittedly, everything that you see on the table here, I already had and didn't have to go out and source for making today's video. I just went into my workshop and grabbed a GPU out of a computer and then grabbed a dock. But given today's prices, this entire setup right here is $630. The dock is about $200 and the GPU runs for about $430. And I'll leave links to these products in the description of today's video. Pragmata is a game that looks great and runs great in this setup, and I'm very happy to see how well it's performing here. What are some games that you'd like to see in this setup? Drop a comment and let me know. At the time of making this video, the GPU I used in this setup is going for about $430 US. And then the eGPU attachment or enclosure is going for about another 200. So you can have this whole setup for about 630 bucks, and it's significantly faster than the Steam machine. And it's almost 40% less expensive. Just calling out some key specs that will make a difference here. The GPU I have is 16 gigs of VRAM. The Steam machine only has 8. The clock speed on my GPU is 2500 megahertz. The Steam machine's 2200 megahertz. And my memory bandwidth is 322 gigabytes per second. Steam machine's about 288 gigabytes per second. And overall floating point performance is 25 teraflops. I've been working on this video for about a month, and at the time I started, SteamOS Stable was not yet shipped. I was working off the main 3.9 OS update channel, but all the drivers and kernels that are needed are now part of stable SteamOS, which is even better. For most of the gameplay here, I use balanced TDP settings, and I use my Legion Go 2, but I expect the same results no matter which handheld you're using. And that's because the bottleneck is the connection between the eGPU to your console. Rarely is it going to ever be the CPU. And to further prove that, later on in the video, I modulate the TDP settings so we can study the effects it has on gameplay performance. Let's take a look at the settings I used for Black Myth Wukong. I started out with 4K resolution. Pretty much most of the settings are just the default settings. And for super resolution sampling, I used the NXR setting. And the only thing I changed here was to enable FrameGen by setting it to auto. Otherwise, everything else is part of the very high preset. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of Black Myth Wukong running at 4K using our external GPU, using two different TDP presets, balance and performance. And on the left, we've got balance, and I put this test together to help illustrate that the CPU of our gaming handheld is typically not the bottleneck. In fact, it's the connection from the eGPU to your console or laptop or other device. And if you take a look at the average FPS that's in the top left of each screen, you see there's no noticeable difference between these two TDP settings. It's a little hard to distinguish because the text is so small, and I'm working on a way to improve this in the future. But one thing I want to call out is that the GPU is at 95% utilization, so it's staying busy. Even though our connection to the eGPU is our bottleneck, our GPU is working very hard. Here's a graph of our average FPS at the two TDP presets, balance and performance. And our dark blue bar is our average FPS, and our light blue bar is our 1% low frames. From this chart, it's clear that increasing our TDP doesn't help with our FPS. And that means that we're in a happy place here. We can run at a lower TDP, meaning that our console's heating up less and our GPU is still staying busy. To help further illustrate this point, I've created this chart that shows our max CPU and max GPU temperatures. The blue bar is our max CPU temperature, and the green bar is our max GPU temperature. And you can see using balance, we're staying about 5 degrees cooler. There's almost no difference between the GPU temperature in both cases. Note that this is the temperature of our eGPU, not our internal integrated graphics card. Then I reran the same exact test with the same settings, but I dropped the resolution down to 2K to see what it buys us. It gave us about a 5 FPS boost. So not a big difference here. Black Myth Wukong is just a tough game to run. Overall, I'm very pleased with the performance in this setup, and I know that this setup is less expensive and it's already outperforming the Steam machine. There you have it. If you already own a gaming handheld, I provided you with an eGPU setup that transforms your device into a more powerful Steam machine at 40% less than the cost of the Steam machine. And we're not talking about a small performance difference. We're talking about something that's going to target 2K and 4K gaming. I really don't know why Valve said that the Steam machine would be able to play games at 4K. I don't see them being able to play modern AAA games at 4K. I really don't know what they were thinking. How many of you out there are planning to build your own Steam machine now that it's fully supported? How many of you out there are planning to get an eGPU set up like this to transform your gaming handheld into a Steam machine? Or how many of you out there are planning to get a Steam machine either way? Drop a comment, let me know. Until next time, hit that like button and subscribe. That way you don't miss all the amazing tech, toys, and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.